All right, thank you so much for coming, everybody. For those of you who don't know I think you know all of us, but we are the Office of Counseling and Student Success, and I'm Ariella Panic.
John Erbola.
Lisa Volante and Kaylin Diaz.
And we're here, this is going to be more of a conversation. There are going to be some role plays, but we're counselors, so if we could pick up on anxiety very well. So if you look anxious, we won't pick on you. But we do need people to volunteer, okay? So today's purpose is what we do as a division and in general is we help students. We help support them in a variety of different ways. And even though maybe our offices do different things, we all experience similar situations. So for example, I spoke to Harvey from Financial Aid yesterday, and he said, you know, we see a lot of students who fill out the FAFSA and they think they're gonna get money immediately. And I said, you know, that's a good point, they think. It's their perception. In our office, they think if they come in for a late withdrawal, they're gonna get it immediately. Records and reg, oh, I don't want to be in this class anymore, I want to go in this one. Do it for me now, for free, immediately, right? So we all have different things. Career services, I want a job yesterday, immediately. So it's the way we perceive things, and students perceive things, perceptions, reality. And a lot of times there's many variables that we don't know about that students are experiencing. And it can make conversation and communication with them a little bit tricky or difficult. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some of the things that may have happened, some unnoticeable things that may be occurring, some underlying themes, some beliefs and assumptions that maybe we have and they have. And we're going to talk it out, and we're going to talk about how to de-escalate the situation. And of course, we are here to do that. But sometimes it might not be a point where you need us, and you just ask the right question and the conversation is different. Or it might take a couple minutes for us to get to your office, and then you have an opportunity to have that conversation as well. All right, are we all in the right place right now? Yes? Okay, good. So we are going to start off by asking you a question.
Yeah, so hopefully you gave some thought to this before you came here today, or maybe you have some experiences that are so ready and available in your memory that you're ready to tell us about them. But we'd like to try to start the day a little bit like that. Think about some of the experiences you've had with students. If you'd like to share even the specific details, feel free to do that. But beyond sort of what Ariella was saying, like beyond the discrepancy with, you know, I want this class or I need this money, try to think about more of the relational aspects of it. And where did it go wrong, and what could you possibly, in retrospect, have done differently to make it a little bit less of a conflict? Does anybody have anything that they're thinking about right now? Maybe a recent experience or a past experience, one that's going to go in your unwritten memoir?
I do.
Chris?
As some of you know, we do get a lot of angry people in the office. And you can easily handle it, you know, please them or help them. Usually Jan and I usually don't have a problem, you know, asking the right questions and finding where they need to get the help and the answers that they need. I had an experience last week that I've never had, and it was to the point where I was actually scared, and I was like, maybe I should call security. But I tried to calm the student down. They just had a lot of anger and the hate on their face, and they were swearing, throwing stuff at my desk, and it was all over. You know, he wanted to be in state, and he said he lived in state all his life, but he attended an out-of-state high school and an out-of-state college, and he's a visiting student. So, you know, we need certain documentation, and he just would not budge, throwing his license at me, just angry, you know, and I apologized to him. I tried to remain calm, but when people get angry, you start to shake, and then you're not thinking, and then you don't know what to say, you know, and I'm like, I just have to stay calm, I can't react, and just, you know, apologetic, you know, these are our policies, I'm very sorry, would not accept anything that I was saying. So I said, you know, I'll be more than happy to have the vice president reach out to you. I can't, you know, I said, I value my job, this is not a decision that I can make. You know, these are required documents, you know, that you have to have. So it shook me up pretty bad, and he actually came back later in the day with everything, did not listen to anything I told him, and had all the wrong stuff. So it escalated even higher. Like, he was foaming me up the mouth, angry, like he wanted to just choke me.
So, I just want to, because I think you could probably teach this session, Chrissy, because basically everything you're saying, right, was like textbook.
Oh,
okay?
yeah.
And we'll go over each one of those things individually, but the good thing to remember is like, the reason most conflict exists in relationships is because you need a willing participant, right? You could read a handbook on how to deal with that situation, but ultimately you need the other person to come along for the ride. So the fact that it didn't work shouldn't say, well, the next time when somebody comes in angry, I'm going to give it right back to them. Don't misconstrue the result as being evidence that what your process was wrong.
Right. I didn't feel I was wrong in the process at all, but, you know, it was scary. It was the first time I was ever scared, and I was by myself in the office, and when he came back the second time, I was by myself that day, so I was just like trying to do anything just to appease him, and then when he came back the second time really angry, I was just apologetic. I said, just let me make a copy of everything you have, and I'll see what I can do for you, like just to try to diffuse the situation. So at that point, it was just about diffusing the situation, because I was not going to make him happy at all. And then once he went home, leave it, you know, for Dr. Simmons, I explained to her everything to try and work it out with him. But he did return with all his stuff the next day, and he was still very angry, like just looking at me like he just wanted to like, and I was just like, I just kept being nice and thank you for bringing everything in, and you know, but it's just, I feel like you can't change the way they handle it. It's how you react to it.
Exactly.
It's how you react, yeah.
And it sounds like anything you said, he was going to react the same way.
Right, and he didn't listen to
Right.
what I said. So
Right.
he wasn't even taking in what I was telling him he needed
Right.
to do. He was just, he was beyond that, and I knew he was.
Right, he was already reacting before he even got in
when
there.
he walked in.
And actually, I want to thank you for telling us about that story. And we're actually going to do a role play that's somewhat similar.
Okay.
And even though we may not be able to stop the occurrence and de-escalate it, you probably did de-escalate it, Chrissy.
Yeah.
Because if you handled it in a different way.
Yeah, I could have gotten angry and
Exactly.
and pushed his buttons, but I'm
Right.
like, what? It's not going to help anything.
Right.
It's not.
We're going to show some reasons why that student may have been that way too. So
Yeah,
that's
that would
gonna
be
good.
helpful, because that's, you know, like I said, we get people who are angry, but that's the first time I was ever scared. Like, I was like, oh man, you know, like, I was gonna call you guys or call security, but I was able to get them, you know, out the door.
You did a great job. You did really
Yeah.
great.
So I just want to say, so whether or not you've had an experience quite as extreme as that, you've probably dealt with some unhappy or unsatisfied student before. And it's going to be very easy for you to feel attacked, because you are being attacked in a lot of cases. Whether it's fair or not, at that moment, you represent the entire college. You are CCM in those moments, and every frustration, because that didn't happen in a vacuum, right? Like, you got him 15 steps into this process that he's now, and you were the lucky one who got to meet him in that
Yeah.
moment. But
Yeah.
at that moment, you are essentially the personification of every frustration he's dealt with and every roadblock he's met along the way. And it's not fair, but the reality is that's a function of our job. So whether it gets to something as extreme as that or not, the point of this day is basically to help, even though it may not always work out exactly the way you want, to still use a process that is going to at least increase the likelihood that it'll be a successful outcome.
Does anyone have any maybe less extreme experience that they'd like to share? Yeah, Danielle. Great.
I think like sometimes, like I think we all probably have familiarity with it. You know, you have a student that everything would be going really calm, and they come with their parent or, you know, mom or dad, and there's conflict between the student and the parent. So, you know, when you try to kind of work with them and intervene, like they're kind of having their own issue and trying to like bring the focus back while not like usurping anybody, but, you know, just trying to make it student focused, because, you know, a lot of times the parents, they'll come in and they'll be like, we would like to register, you know, we were looking through the course schedule, his password doesn't work when I log in, you know, like that type of
Right,
thing.
right.
So it's kind of to de-escalate it amongst them so that you can get what you need done with the student too.
Yeah, a lot of times parents and the student, they're having a fight, a full-on argument fight while you're like, can I help you?
Glad
So,
that the
yeah,
window
that's-
is there.
Yeah, exactly, so
Yeah.
it's hard to, sorry to jump
No.
in, but it's hard to reprimand an adult, where you're like, you know, your kid, you know, can you calm down? You know, so.
It's an
how-
interesting wrinkle, because we see parents in the office, like, but not usually in that context, and that's not even something I'd consider. It's an interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I recently had a parent that came in with their son and said, I didn't know he failed, you guys didn't tell me, and he got dismissed, what are you gonna do about it? So, you know, it's about educating the parent, and these are really good examples, and we don't have a role play, including parents for today, but I think we should really follow up with that. If we have time, we can do it. If not, we can have another presentation. And this is just one of many, hopefully, that we can continue. I hope we continually get your participation. So thank you for making the time. But if you have any ideas at the end, there are surveys. So before you leave, fill them out at the end. And give us your ideas, because that's a great one. And we say Helicopter Parents Lab, and they want to support their children. And we want to help them do that in a way that will help them create independence within their children at the same time. So, and one last thing I wanted to mention, we don't have copies of the PowerPoint, but if you'd like it, we can absolutely send it to you. Okay, all right, so thank you so much for sharing. We're gonna get started now. I'm gonna go over here and give this to Lisa.
So what could, I'm sure these right, what comes to mind when you hear that about mental illness, or, you know, somebody that's kind of suffering through some mental health issues? What are some of the words? I'm sure you all can identify, right? Being called crazy, nuts, insane, psycho, right? What are the dangers of that, of labeling people like that?
Getting them mad. Believing.
Well, telling them right to their face,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly. But even just mentally labeling them as, wow, this person's
Well,
crazy.
it's negative for you, so you automatically assume, so you're gonna react because you have that negative thought already in your head
Right.
about them.
So you're
You're
gonna,
judging.
right, if you have that perception about someone and that in some way they're damaged or there's something wrong with them, right? That's going to affect the way you react with them, maybe in a negative, maybe even condescending way,
Yep.
right? If you have these kind of beliefs, right? So, I mean, our society, we still use these words, right? As kind of progressive as I think we are in mental health, there's still that stigma, right? And using these words and kind of looking at people in this context really is kind of, you don't mean to do it, but you are kind of creating that stigma. So it's really important to kind of, you know, check yourself sometimes. Do you use these words, right? Are these things that you kind of come up in your mind when you see students or when you see people that are kind of struggling through things or having a reaction maybe that's kind of different than how you would react, right? So it's very important to kind of, you know, break that cycle. And I think a lot of times this comes from kind of fear and misunderstanding, right? Not really understanding where a person's coming from and what their perception is. So I just think in general, putting yourself in that person's shoes, right? And having a little bit more of perspective taking instead of just kind of focusing on these labels or focusing on your kind of perspective.
So some common misunderstandings of mental health and wellness come up often, especially for those who don't directly work with it like we do every day. So I know a lot of us, you know, we do our job, we're working with students, they come in and we might not think that mental health, like those words that Lisa was saying, they come up and they can create kind of this scary feeling like mental health. This student has a mental illness, what exactly does that mean? But there are some mythbusters that we would like to go over with you guys. One of them, the biggest one, is that mental health issues are uncommon. And I think that's a lot of us, you know, as well-to-do, you know, people that work here can maybe sometimes forget that mental health issues actually occur in every 1 to 4 people. So it's very, very common, actually. People with mental health problems are violent and unpredictable. And that's not true either. You know, when, again, there's a fear tactic when it comes with mental health. Whereas the vast majority of people with mental health are actually going to be the victims of violent acts, not being the violent perpetrators themselves. So only 3 to 5% of violent acts can actually be contributed to individuals with serious mental illness. So, you know, in case you hear somebody has a mental health problem, it doesn't mean that they're going to be a danger to you. People with mental health issues can snap out of it if they try hard enough. And this is so not true as well. It's not as easy said and done if a student is feeling blue or just feeling anxious about a test. Okay, yeah, it's fine, get over it, you'll be okay, just move forward. It's so much harder for students to get through something like a depression episode or an anxious episode. It takes a lot of work and a lot of courage for them to even do that to begin with. There's no hope for people with mental health problems. Of course, we hope you all know that there is total hope. You know, mental health issues are totally treatable, but most of it takes the work of the student, as you can probably imagine. The student has to come forward and say, you know what, I'm really struggling with something and I need help. You know, being at college, we don't force students to do things like, you know, in high school where maybe students were red flagged for guidance counselor work or something like that. You know, working with adults, there is total hope for them, but it takes the action of the person to acknowledge that they need the help. People with mental health issues cannot tolerate the stress of school, work, and family. Again, I hope you're seeing a trend here. Of course they can, but it does take work. It takes practice, it takes time, and maybe even takes therapy. And that's, again, what we're here for in the counseling office, to help at least get them started if they've never done it before. And this is the biggest bullet for you guys. I can't do anything for a person with mental health problems. We want you all to know that you absolutely can be an advocate and a supporter for somebody with mental health issues. We don't have to do it all. You guys are certainly the first steps in a lot of cases, like that student that you talked about. I don't even think we saw that student, did we? So,
No. I would have liked to have, but
right.
he was too angry to
Yeah,
hear
so
anything.
we're not going to see nearly all the students that you guys have really busy offices, and you see probably more students than we'll ever see in the counseling office to some degree anyway. So there are absolutely so many things that you guys can do, and the biggest thing that, you know, again, Chrissy, you said a lot, is just being there, being supportive, being empathetic, listening. This simple 3 things that we all are embodied to do, absolutely. So that's the message. This last bullet is definitely the message that we're sending you off with today as we continue through the presentation. And where's the clicker? Okay. So again, just more facts, kind of what I just talked about. 1 in 4 American adults do experience a mental health issue. So there's what, like 3 to a dozen of us in here, so that means that statistic is high. Almost 1/3 of all college students report having felt so depressed that they had trouble functioning. And you can imagine that, especially with today's college students. It's not as easy as just, hey, I'm going to college, especially for the 2-year university people or 2-year college people. They work, they have families, they commute, they have jobs upon jobs upon jobs sometimes. They live with their parents who they don't get along with. They live with roommates that they don't get along with. So imagine feeling, and plus they're taking on a full-time course load, so it's a lot for college students. So feeling so depressed that they do have trouble functioning, and that's maybe where we see that anger flare up like you saw last week come up. Mental health issues in the college student population, such as depression, anxiety, eating disorders, can be associated with a lower GPA and also a higher probability of dropping out of college. So, you know, kind of contradicts what I said before on that previous slide, that students or people with mental health can be successful, and it's true that they totally can, but that's with treatment, that's with acknowledgement, that's with support of all of us that can foster the student to proceed in a way that will help them succeed here at CCM. More than 80% of college students felt overwhelmed by all they had to do in the past year. Again, all the things I just listed, that's no surprise. 45% of felt things were totally hopeless. And suicide is the 2nd leading cause of death among college students, which is really high. That's a huge statistics. And if you were here, a couple years ago, 3 years ago, we had that presentation here on campus, Send Silence Packing. I don't know if you guys remember that or not, with the presentation of the book bags strung across our campus as a representative of a student who died by suicide each year. So, which is what, 1,100 students or something like that per year? It's a lot. And suicide is totally preventable, but again, it takes the work of us as the educators, staff, faculty, what it be to, to assess, to maybe intervene, to even create a rapport with the student to catch them before they fall. So it takes the work of all of us.
And just looking at some of the factors, that face college students, not just the mental health issue, but also just a feeling of general stress, lack of sleep, right? I think most of the students that we see are always kind of going, have jobs, have to study, have extracurricular activities, right? So there's a lot of, in this, especially a certain age group, college population don't get enough sleep, family concerns, financial insecurity, sometimes even, homelessness. So there's a lot of, things that they're experiencing that kind of can add to the stress and to their mental, if they do have mental health issues.
Just wanted to add, if you look at the last 3 bullets on that, you really can see a common progression of how someone gets to suicide. You're overwhelmed because you care about things. That's what anxiety is, and stress. It's doing things that are important. Things aren't working. It gets debilitating. Eventually you get hopeless. And then when you're hopeless and there's nothing else that you feel like you can do, people give up. So it doesn't just happen. It's a progression, and often you are encountering students along the life cycle of getting to this unfortunate endpoint. All right, so we're going to play a little game. We're going to ask you basically we're going to give you some different things that you've probably seen many times. We've already talked about a couple of them. And then ask you to maybe contemplate a different explanation for what could be going on. If I can give you one piece of advice for dealing with these situations, is try to be curious. If you go into an unpredictable or uncertain situation from like the perspective of curiosity, it's sort of an antidote to distress and anxiety. If you are facing a situation like Chrissy was, and it takes practice and some willingness, but if you can go into that situation and instead of respond defensively or feel attacked, but instead think to yourself, I wonder what could possibly be going on with this person, that they could be acting this way. So we're going to ask you to do that now. You can think of any encounter you've had with a student or just in general in your life where you have what has been presented to you as anger. Can maybe you think of another explanation for what might be actually happening underneath the surface?
And I just want to add real quick, given what Chrissy said, you de-escalated the situation really well. Sometimes when someone comes off angry, the best thing to do, which I think a lot of you do already, is just say, yeah, that stinks. Like that I would feel the same way. Let's think about what we can do. So just acknowledging what they're feeling is real, even if we don't agree with it. That's, again, perception is reality. That's how they see it. So acknowledging it and saying, okay, let's work together and collaborate with them, that's going to de-escalate it really quickly. Okay, sorry, Suzanne, I saw your hand.
Oh.
Angry, yes?
Sometimes I've noticed with some people, not necessarily at work, if they're really, really angry, it's that they're really scared.
Yeah, that's what we thought too.
She's not a plant, I swear.
It's the aura in that room. Well, yeah, we get defensive, we get angry because we're afraid that something bad is going to happen, that we don't have control over something, and then it comes out as anger, when in reality, we're angry because we're scared that it's not going to work to our to what we want.
How about impatient? Somebody may just be impatient, but try to go a little deeper than that. Think about maybe
Anxiety?
Yes. Wow, you guys are on fire here.
So, anxiety and being scared, obviously very closely related. Fear being more of like a raw, visceral, emotional feeling. But you are at the window, you're dealing with a student, and they're like trying to rush you along. Most likely, it's the anxiety of having to do something else after that, or worrying about the outcome of what they're there to do. But
Yeah.
it may be manifesting, and you're often the target of it.
Have you ever had an experience where a student asks you a question and you're answering and they cut you off to ask you another question? Yeah, we all have been there. So sometimes it can be helpful to just address it and say, I know you have a lot of questions. If you want, you could write them down. Would you like me to finish explaining the question you just asked? So sometimes letting them know, and a lot of times when I've done that, students are like, oh, I didn't realize it. They have no clue because the anxiety is propelling them to do so.
How about entitled? I'm sure we've all encountered this. Are students entitled?
I really
So
don't.
certainly they can be entitled, right? But
I'm gonna.
what could be the
There could be a
function?
lot of-
Because I'm not gonna get the right answer, but.
There's
like,
no right answer though. I'm glad you said that.
To me, like, sometimes I think it's because somebody's insecure. But, you know, because if, let's say, like, we'll use Titans Direct, for example, we have one student that just graduated and always would say, I was told I would never have to use Titans Direct. I refuse to learn Titans Direct. WebAdvisor is the only way, and the student doesn't want to learn, like, do it for me. And I think at the root of it all, it's probably that he, like, maybe doesn't know how to use Titans Direct, instead of saying, like, I really don't understand, could you show me? I think it's like,
Right.
you're gonna show me, like, right now, kind of thing.
Right? Ding, ding, ding. So, insecure, same thing. It's
I know.
the same.
They might be confused. They might actually think they are entitled to something. So that, you know, the student who wants to just withdraw from the class, right? They come up to you, you know, from your perspective, that you can't just switch into some other class whenever you want to. But you only know what you know. And they're going up to the window thinking that this is a commonplace request. So it's going to come off from your perspective as entitled. Like, who is this entitled kid who's demanding to be put somewhere else? To them, maybe from their perspective, it doesn't seem like an outrageous request. They may not, because they don't know any better. And sometimes you're going to encounter an entitled student who objectively is entitled. Still, it's still important to try to understand, and, like, once again, take that curious perspective and understand the function of that entitlement. The reality is this is we're not going to get into too much of, like, the generational differences, but it's different. They're used to wanting or needing something, or having an idea about something they need and being able to be immediately gratified. It's not, and that's going to create a certain, like, anticipation for, I need this, I'm going to be able to get it, and that can come off as entitlement.
Yeah, let me Google it, right? And let me check it on my phone. And that's another workshop that we're planning on doing on generational differences in the future. And again, like Danielle said, there's more than one answer. There's no one correct answer to this. It depends on the student, but we're generalizing right now for each one. So paranoia. So someone who's like, well, you don't want to help me, no one wants to help me, I'm by myself, I don't think this is ever going to work. What could be another?
Or scared?
That definitely is one of them, yeah. This one's a little more clinical. That could be it too. There's no wrong answer, honestly.
Yeah, so, like, all of those things are true. Paranoia is, I guess, maybe at the far end of the spectrum of anxiety, right? But sometimes, like, actual paranoid ideation is a function of something more like a mental illness. It's often something that comes with psychosis. So you may or may not be in front of or working with someone who is actively psychotic in that moment, and they're telling you that they feel like they're being persecuted, and you're the reason that there's something wrong, and that you're doing something to them, and that everyone's out to get them. You know, it might just be an extreme of anxiety. It might even be an extreme of entitlement, but sometimes you may or may not be encountering someone who's actively psychotic, and paranoia is very often something that comes with it.
Right, and there's different progressions too. So when we think of psychotic, it's not automatically like hearing voices. It could be just feeling persecuted all of the time. Okay, so pressured speech. Does everyone know what pressured speech is? No? Okay. Do you want to give an example? Do you want to do it?
Like very
Like really quickly,
intensive,
just-
fast
yeah.
talking.
I need you to withdraw right now. Let me do it. Come on. Right? Really pressured. I'm talking right at Rutgers around
My kids.
Right. So this is a little bit clinical too. What could another reason be? And there's a lot, but can you think of any? Yeah.
I don't know if it like qualifies into a word, but a lot of these students like have a lot of pressure from their parents, and maybe not just their parents, like outside sources,
Yeah.
peers, and I think like, oh my gosh, I got to do this now because if I don't drop this grade, like I'm not going to get into this, and this isn't going to get into this. So I don't know.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's a really good example. Like they basically work them up, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
you better say this, you better ask this, you
Yeah.
better get a solution to this, and they're like basically coming into the situation anticipating your resistance, and
Yeah.
mom's gonna yell at me if I don't get it done. It's a really good point. Once again, it could be really any of those things that are above just general distress or anxiety, but sometimes it's a function of something more clinical, and someone who is actively in a manic episode, you will see pressured speech from them very often.
So bipolar, formerly known as manic depression, so it's when somebody is feeling a manic episode. They could be up all night, they could be compulsively shopping, they could be just unable to sleep, compulsively eating. It could be a lot of different things, and a lot of times it's this newfound energy. So if you see a student who you've seen every day and they've been fine, and all of a sudden in the last couple of days you've noticed an extreme change, it could be because of mania. The same thing could be because of depression too. That looks different, right? So it depends on the type of bipolar. And we're not here to give you Psych 101. But when someone is, oh, I did this and I have to do this, it could be because of mania. Any questions about that? Okay. All right.
About distraction, seeing a student, they seem distracted.
This one might be a little easier. Yeah.
No, maybe someone who, again, has some kind of a learning disability or.
So something like
autism type of
ADHD.
thing, yeah, or that, yeah.
Yeah.
It can be anxiety as well. It can be something more neurodevelopmental like ADHD. Maybe they're just distracted because they're on their phone, whatever it might be. But nonetheless, how you respond to it, that's sort of the second half of what we're going to talk about, is important because they came there for your help. You need to try and help them to get through that situation. Obviously, having someone who's focused is going to make it a lot easier for you to help them. It's going to probably be a little bit more challenging with someone who has like an actual neurodevelopmental disorder. But someone who maybe is distracted because they're anxious, doing something to calm them down, what Ariel was saying before, is trying to stop them and reassure them that you're going to be able to help them. You're not going to let them leave until you've basically laid out all of the steps for them. That's something that can help get them back on track as well.
And sometimes we even,
Well, I was just going to elaborate on that. I literally had a student just about an hour ago, and he clearly, there was an issue, and he was a brand new student, he's trying to register for some of the remedials for summer. He wanted he asked me 6 times, when can I meet my advisor, when can I meet my advisor? And the whole time his phone was there, he was playing Pokemon Go. And I was like, so I kind of was like, oh, that's cool, yeah, but let's look here first, and I'll tell you how to get your advisement. He's like, I don't get it. He was more focused on who the person was rather than the advisement itself. But at the same time, he was doing, he's back and forth on his phone, and I was like, please stop. But he got through it. But it was definitely, I was like, the kind of the mom, and you want to be like, can you put your phone away? But he would have gotten angry, I think.
right.
Yeah, so.
Well, that's a great example. And sometimes asking them, hey, do you want to put this down to talk? But other times, believe it or not, that actually helps calm and self-soothe.
And I kind of got that.
Right.
Because every time he was listening to me, he was looking at it.
Right.
So I kind of noticed, but he wasn't really acting on it. so it was fun.
And it may be because of anxiety that was coming in too, but him looking at the screen was probably to self-soothe because looking at you caused anxiety.
Exactly.
And I'm going to do a shameless plug. Lisa does a phenomenal presentation on ADHD, and we're actually about to post it on our website. So check that out if you have any questions. She goes into the topic thoroughly. And even us, sometimes we have to take a step back. I recently had a student who was on his phone and was not listening to me whatsoever. And then I called him out. I said, hey, do you think you can put that down for a second? I didn't realize that he was actually looking on, at that point it was WebAdvisor, looking at WebAdvisor to figure out his password and stuff. So, sometimes I have to take a step back and before reacting, think, okay, there usually is a good reason why they're on their phone. Okay.
And I just want to say, that's usually easier for us to do than it is for
Still
you.
hard for us sometimes.
Number one, because that's what we're trained to do, but also the context in which we're seeing students is different than you.
Right.
We're usually they're coming to us because of, that's what we're there for, to help understand this. And that's hard for you to stay in tune with on a day-to-day basis when you're there doing more transactional type of work. So we're not trying to suggest that this is easy. It's challenging to constantly stay emotionally and empathetically open to these situations. But I'd like to think it's going to make their life and your life easier if it's something you try to commit to. And then how about just generally socially inappropriate behavior?
On the spectrum?
Yeah. Yep. Autism spectrum disorder, better known as ASD. Yep. So there's no longer Asperger's. My accessibility services people could attest to that. It's now ASD. And so if you guys want to add anything, just kidding, you don't have to. But if you want to add anything, feel free. So a lot of times these students are unable to pick up on social cues. And they can come off as impulsive, or someone concrete may not understand sarcasm, may not be able to interpret what the person means. So I had a student, and I was just recently telling Sheila, I had a student who the professor called and was very upset and said, I feel threatened in my class. The student is making me feel uncomfortable. I want her out. So I met with the student and I said, okay, let's call her Kendra. Okay, Kendra, Professor so-and-so does not feel comfortable. Please don't talk to him anymore. And she said, okay. Next day I get a call from the professor. Well, now she's writing me letters. So shame on me for not realizing, very concrete. She took it as, oh, okay, I can't talk to my professor, but I can still write to him, and I can still tell him my thoughts. So takes it very factual and concrete. So then I brought her in and I said, okay, you cannot communicate with this professor. If it has nothing to do with your assignments, you cannot communicate in this manner. And I had to be very descriptive. And long story short, the professor ended up being fine with her because she was able to understand and abide by his rules. So that's a really good example. And a lot of times they may say things inappropriately and not pick up on the fact that it's inappropriate. Anyone can do that, actually. So, you want to add anything else?
No, that was pretty comprehensive.
All right. Before we go on to role play, no, it's okay. Any questions about this slide? No? Okay.
So, sort of the overarching theme here is that students are going to come to you. They have certain expectations as for how that encounter is going to go down, and it might be as specific as what you're going to do for them or how you're going to respond to their question. Usually, they're going to probably, and this is going back to the generational thing, but those expectations are going to diverge pretty significantly from what your expectations are. And that's a result of probably generational differences. It's a result of you having knowledge of what your work is and what your process is. And very often, unfortunately, even though we have student handbooks and things like that, they have no idea what they're supposed to be doing. So sometimes their perception of reality is not accurate, like the circumstances where they want to switch into a class halfway through the semester. It's not a question of whether or not they're right or wrong. And that is a very difficult thing to do. As I was just saying, it's difficult for anybody. It's a little easier for us because of the context we're working in and our training, but it's going to be the biggest challenge for you to not respond to those situations defensively, but to realize that whether or not their expectations are realistic, whether or not you think it's right or wrong, whether or not you think it's inappropriate or rude for how they do things, you might be right. Objectively, you may be right. Objectively, that student may be entitled. But part of being a student-centered institution, and that's what we aspire to be, one of the hallmarks of that is that we meet students where we are. This trend is not going to suddenly go back to the way things were. It's going to become only more extreme. So the being on a phone while they're trying to talk to you, the sense of immediate entitlement to immediate gratification. These are not things that are going to suddenly change back. So it's not a question of whether or not they're right and wrong, or whether or not, it's not a question of whether it's fair that you're the one who's got to face the wrath of the student when it wasn't you who did something wrong. It's just the way that it is. And unless you choose to leave this place, you're going to be dealing with it. So trying to take that position of, I want to understand where the student's coming from, as opposed to, I feel attacked by this student, is going to be one of the best things you can do. And then using things like techniques like de-escalation. One of the things we didn't talk about before that you mentioned, that when you talked about bringing Betty into the situation, right?
Yeah, bring someone else.
Send it up the line. So in counseling and therapy, we call that triangulation. At that moment when there is a conflict between the two of you, you know that it's not Chrissy saying you're not allowed to do this. Go ahead and say, no, it's not up to me. I know, I agree. It's a completely stupid rule. It's not fair. We deal with parents with FERPA, right? Oh, I totally understand. I have kids. It would drive me crazy that I didn't know what they're doing. Unfortunately, there's a federal law that prevents me from doing that. Do that as much as you can. That's why you have supervisors. Send it up the line and say, I'm not saying that you have to pass the buck on to them, but say, listen, it's not me that's telling you no. I understand, I empathize with your frustration, but this is how it is. It's this third party that makes it this way. And doing something like that is going to help de-escalate the situation. And like you were saying, you didn't feel like it de-escalated, but Ariella made a great point. You don't have the luxury of seeing what would have happened if you treated him differently.
Wow.
So relatively speaking, you probably did de-escalate the situation.
And depending on the situation, if you were working with parents, depending on their mindset, it would be a good idea to explain where the rule came from. Yeah, we didn't make it. Yeah, it's a federal law, but why is it there? It's to help your student. It's to help them grow as a mature, independent person.
And there's also brochures,
Right.
too, so if you can hand
Yep.
them a brochure and say, you can, look right here, it's written, and and
Exactly.
here's the document, you can review it, and if you still have questions, come back,
Right.
Or if your supervisor is there, go and get them,
Right.
because it does help to have someone else, they feel they've gone up a step,
Right.
and,
Doesn't even have to be your supervisor, right? It's like
Pretend.
the email that Betty sends out at the beginning of every semester. Like, oh, you see one of your colleagues in distress there, hop in. Just something like, changing up the mix a little bit can de-escalate a situation.
Absolutely. Okay, so now we're going to do a role play. We're going to do it first. And we're going to go over as a group maybe what could have been done differently, maybe what Maggie was experiencing. And then we're going to have two of you lovely people come up, and one of you are going to be the student and one of you is going to be the staff or faculty person. But we're going to help you with it. We're all going to help each other, okay? All right, I'm going to
All right, so I'm not going to tell you too much up front, but basically, Ariella's going to be playing Maggie. I'm going to be playing someone. Danielle. I'm going to be playing Danielle.
I just want to say, we use records and registration as an example.
Yes.
It's loosely based on something that happened in our department.
Don't personalize.
Yes, and the second one too, it's not, what was it, Bursar? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so Maggie's coming. She's coming up to the window demanding to be withdrawn from her class. Upon being informed that the withdrawal deadline has passed, Maggie became belligerent, screaming, cursing, and demanding to see the dean. So that's what we're going to see how I choose to respond to this situation.
All right, so I'm gonna open the door.
There's no door.
I need to see the dean now.
Okay, is there
I need to
something?
go and see the dean now because I can't go into my class and you're trying to make me fail. You're trying to make me fail.
I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just sitting here trying to do my job. This is not where the dean's located. Is there something I can help you with?
Are you gonna give me permission to go in my damn class? No? Okay, give me the dean. Now.
I don't even know what your classes are, so why don't you slow down, stop yelling at me, please, I don't appreciate that, and talk to me about what it is that you actually need.
You just want me to fail, you don't want me to leave, I don't understand. Just let me see the dean, I need to get in my class. She said I can't get in my class, she said I can't
Not
take my
anybody
test.
can just see the dean just because they want to see the dean, okay? So if you'd like, you're at records and registration, maybe there's something I can help you with. Do you want to maybe slow down, stop yelling for a minute, and tell me actually what it is that you
Oh my
want?
God, holy shit, I'm done with you.
Good.
Okay. That was a little dramatic, but maybe not. No, you don't think so? No, okay. We've definitely all seen this before, right?
Danielle's much nicer than that.
He was not Danielle.
So what went wrong in that situation? What's going on with Maggie? What do you think, what did you observe there from either one of our perspectives in terms of maybe where that broke down?
I, like, from your perspective, and I love you, so it's not you, it's just like, I think, like, it sort of seemed that as Maggie was getting higher, you were getting higher a little bit too, and your voice was getting a little bit, and I think maybe if your tone was lower and almost like the empathize, say, oh my gosh, that sounds really stressful, can you tell me a little bit more about it? Because it felt a little confrontational both ways.
It was like matching her tone,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which is, if you play that out to its logical extreme, that's how competition eventually breaks down any type of relationship. So you're going here, I'm going here. And eventually we're gonna just meet at the top. So once again, that's hard to do. Because sometimes you might like be, in that little moment there, that was like 8 years of like suppressing that desire to get angry. And I got it was a little bit more conscious.
It was very believable.
You're really contacting something.
I don't appreciate it.
Sometimes that just happens, though. It's not a mindful thing that you're doing. Like it's a completely just a reflexive thing where somebody yells and you yell back.
You're human.
So once again, this is a hard. Everything we're talking about here is not easy. It takes practice and it takes thoughtfulness and intention. It's not something that's going to come naturally. But that's a really good example. So I basically, instead of trying to de-escalate the way that Chrissy did, I basically went blow for blow until eventually she left the situation.
What was going on with me? Any clue? Any idea?
You just came in with
Coming in hot.
horns blaring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't come in like, can you please help me?
Right.
You were like mad as a hornet from the get-go.
Okay, so I appear to be mad, which I was.
Yes.
Were there any other maybe reasons that I was upset that we couldn't have seen just from, I mean, obviously I just presented as angry as anything, but yeah, Suzanne.
It sounds like you felt that maybe no one was kind of understanding the point you were trying to make, that
Right.
you probably met a lot of frustration along the way and just no one's getting it, no one's listening to you.
Right, one of the key things I said was you all want me to fail. So just, yeah,
I was going to say, you wanted to get to your end result much quicker, which was to see the dean. And by causing a scene at any window you go to, people naturally push you down to our But I mean, it is. It's like you want to get to that end result. You don't want to be bothered with the people in between.
Right.
You want to talk to Betty Simmons, and you
Right.
want her to, you know, tell you that it's okay to go to your class, or that she's going to talk to your professor,
Right.
or, you know, you're getting to the top by bypassing the middle
absolutely.
and not really listening to what other people are telling you that you should do.
And
Right.
you can infer that, like I think Suzanne was saying, this was not the first time you tried to address this problem. So that idea of the dean, like that represents something, right? Like the dean is like colloquially like the person who can make the decision, who can wave the wand. So that's the point that she's gotten to now.
And
Yeah.
and with you, John, you were like, not everybody, no one can see the dean. It's like no one gets to see the wizard.
So
can't make them.
What I was trying to,
Yeah.
yeah, so what I was trying to display there is like, you know, I'm
I'm all
annoyed
you
by
got.
your entitlement, right? Like, I'm annoyed that you think you could just come up here and ask to see the dean.
Right.
And, you know, we've all had that feeling before, like, yeah, I bet you do want to see the dean. You think you are. But obviously, not responding that way did nothing to advance the conversation.
So before we tell you what was really going on, because this is loosely based on a real thing that happened in our office, does anyone else want to add anything? Yeah.
The only thing, it's like, it's easier said than done, like, because sometimes I have to remind myself on, especially if we're like an in-person, but they had done, I don't know who did it, but they had done like a conflict resolution workshop here, and one of the things that the gentleman said was, when you're feeling really stressed, you always have to pretend like you're on camera, because you are. Because if it's not the cameras, it could be the students' cell phones, and it's just kind of like, if you were to re-watch yourself, you know, and that's hard. I mean, it's really, really hard to do. But like, if you can, and if you can like take a moment to just be like, okay, if I was looking at it, would I be okay with how I was?
It's funny you said that, because in financial aid, there are students that came to the window, and as they walk away, they would say, Mom, did you get everything she just said?
Oh my gosh.
Be careful, girls.
Oh, they want you to talk to the parents.
Oh,
on
I
the
won't
phone.
do that.
And I don't
but-
do that.
No, I won't
But,
take
yeah.
their phone, but they
Yeah.
actually recorded what I said, and Harvey go, did you notice they just, they just recorded it so their family could hear it. So, watch. So they do.
So with this student, you have to
We
go.
have to head back.
No
Yeah, 'cause we have
problem.
an office
Thank you,
closed.
thank you for coming. So this particular student, we didn't know this, but received an email from the dean saying, before you can come back to class, you need to meet with me because there were things going on in the classroom. So she was upset because there was an exam going on and she was about to fail that class. She was sent down to our office, and public safety actually came. As soon as someone who is feeling persecuted sees someone in uniform, a lot of times it just accelerates. So then she started cursing at him and started screaming, and it turns out she was hallucinating. She was actively hallucinating. So at that point, we got her water, and I said calmly, you need to talk to me, I can't help you if you're screaming. And I brought her in my office, and at that point I let her talk. It didn't make any sense, but for her it was venting. And she calmed down, and then we ended up getting the dean, and we worked it out, and it was okay. But at that moment, my initial reaction was, okay, you can't, and you're cutting me off every time I'm talking to you. You have to take a step back and see, okay, what else could be happening? And if you didn't know the history of this student, there's no way to have known that. Do you want to add anything with that?
Let's get to the.
Okay, yes. All right, there. You guys are up. Oh, actually, we're doing.
You want to do them at the end, or you want to do that first?
Do you want to do it now real quick?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fresh in your mind,
Can we,
sorry.
yeah, so let's do it while it's fresh in your mind. Do we have 2 volunteers to reenact that in a better way?
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Oh, really?
Come on. Well, it's pretty much not even acting, it's every day.
Yeah, there you go.
Leslie,
The
you're
same
gonna
one?
be the
I want to
student?
be the student.
Yeah. You're a little too eager to be like the nice records and
You're so
registration.
good at it.
No, I'm
So
not.
we're gonna do, okay, so you ready? You're gonna be yourself. Yes. I need to withdraw from a class, I need to withdraw right now.
Okay, what class, what term is it?
It's now, it's the summer term, you know the one.
Okay, do you have an ID?
No, it's in my car, I don't have an ID, I just want to get out of the class.
Okay.
It's a psychology class, I don't know the number, I don't know anything about it.
Okay, it sounds like it's really stressful. Let me
Look,
look it
you know
up for
what? I really just think maybe I'm supposed to go see the dean or something. I don't know who I'm supposed to talk to. I just want to get out of the class, get me out of it, tell me where I go next, because I have had it with this place. It's over.
I hear you. I've been in classes too where I felt in a stressful situation. Let me walk down with you and let's see who we can find out. And then
Well, where are we going?
we're gonna go down and see the dean together.
Okay, so am I going to get out of this class?
I am not leaving you until we get some sort of rectification. That's not a word.
Do you even know what vocabulary is?
You're on
All
your
right,
own
so,
camera.
but I am gonna get out of this class, right? Because I got an email and I think I'm being dismissed. I don't really know what's going on and I just gotta get out of this class.
Right there, I've read the petition too. I'd be like, no, I totally hear you, and it sounds really stressful, and it sounds like that would stress me out too. Let me walk down with you.
Okay.
Ultimately, I'm not the dean, but I'm gonna walk down with you, support you, let's see what we can find out, and I'm not gonna leave until we find some direction that you can go in to make everything better.
All right, well, I'm getting a.
What were some of the things Danielle did right?
She was her
Danielle, you
tone.
rocked it.
Her tone.
Is very empathetic, yeah.
Yep.
Kept a very like baseline tone, was empathetic.
Right, and yeah, definitely was very sincere.
Yep.
Yeah, you just felt like she was really listening, very much listening.
Even presented a,
Not like you, Tony, I'm just kidding.
even presented a solution, right?
Correct, oh yeah, that was great.
Collaborating with the student.
And even if it wasn't ultimately going to get her what she wanted, you got to the next step, right? You presented some kind of at least possible solution that we could move on to resolve.
And she felt she had.
with her.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You don't have
Yeah.
to start over
Absolutely.
with somebody. It's like passing on the phone.
You're so
Tell them
right.
why you're passing.
Think
it
about
on.
when you're on the phone with like some kind of business or something, right? You're like, I gotta explain this whole story again. And when they tell you, don't worry about it, I'm gonna fill them in. It's
Right.
like total
Yes.
relief, right? That you don't have to go through it again. It's a
And at
great
that point, that's such a good point, at that point, it wasn't Leslie against the world. She had someone who she was collaborating with, she had someone who was supporting her in that endeavor. She didn't feel alone. Whether or not you were gonna get her what she needed, she knew she had someone who listened to her. And that's what she needed at that moment. Awesome.
And I just want to add that that is Danielle. Every day, she is our ultimate go-to. She's the best.
Can I talk to my children?
All right, our next scene, meet Chevy. Chevy arrives at the bursar's office requesting a full refund for a class he just dropped. He unfortunately was informed that he would only be eligible for a 50% refund at that point in the semester, and he becomes upset, explaining that he does not have enough money to accept that return or refund and doesn't have enough money to pay for a new class that he actually does want. So I'll be the bursar's representative and Lisa is the student. I'm on the phone too.
I need my money back for a class.
Oh.
I
Yes.
need my money back for a class.
Okay, well, you're requesting money back for a class?
I'm not taking the class anymore, so I
Oh.
get my money back.
Okay, so you know that the last day to drop a class was actually 2 days ago, so right now we're at 50%.
But I dropped the class today, and I'm not
Okay.
going to be going to it,
Okay.
so
So at
I
this
get
point
my
in.
money back for the class.
Sure, let me explain. So right now, you're gonna only get 50% back for that class. Is that something that you're okay with?
I need to pick up another class, so how?
Okay, so to
How
pick
do
up
you do that when you don't have money for the whole
Well,
class?
that's not my job. My job is just to issue the money back, so you're gonna have to find someone else that can help you with that part, so.
No one can help me with that part.
Oh, I'm sure there's
I don't
somebody
have
that.
the money.
Okay, but right now, this is my job. I'm trying to help you with my job, and I'll give you the 50% back for the class, and then you'll have to figure out something else to do with the other class.
But I get the money back for the class, or then I can't register for a class.
Right,
Is
you
that
get-
what you're saying?
I said that you get 50%. I didn't say anything else about the other class.
Right, but you're saying, obviously, I can't register for a class.
I didn't say that. I'm
Okay.
talking about the 50%
Right,
refund.
but I can't get in the class right
Sorry. I feel like we're going around in circles, so right now, I'm just telling you what I know is that the last day to get a full refund was a couple days ago. You missed that deadline, so
Well,
we're
then, what
past
am I
that.
gonna do? I
Again-
might as well just go kill myself.
Oh, well, that's a little dramatic, and I'm trying to help you the best that I can, you know.
Don't go kill yourself.
Can you believe that one? Even I was getting a little. So there's a scene for you. What happened this time? So what? I can never stay in character. That's why I'm really So what went wrong?
Oh.
What? Who can name just one of the many things that went wrong?
Your statement of, and it's really hard to watch you guys knowing who you really are, because
Yeah.
obviously it was the direct opposite.
Right.
But anyway, hearing you say it's not my job, like that's usually for people a real, what would that be? It sets someone off.
Mhm.
And trigger.
Trigger.
Yeah,
Thank you.
trigger, right.
For many people, to hear
Yes.
someone say,
Yeah.
you're looking for help, it's not my job, that's something that I don't think. should
Yeah,
ever
so I was
be
being kind of
undermined.
closed-minded, like I wasn't
Yes.
thinking of the whole picture, like I'm just thinking of myself in this scenario. This is the only thing I want to do right now for you. I don't know about the other part, or I'm choosing not to help you with that other part. I could help you, I'm sure, but I'm choosing not to.
The being,
Yeah.
being on the phone and the
Yes,
1 minute
right?
finger. Makes me crazy.
Oh, yeah. That was not good, right? No, not good.
And not giving any
Mhm.
options.
Right.
Yes.
Like, go to financial aid, they'll be sure to give you money.
Right, right.
I'm sure they
Don't
will.
ever say that.
Just go.
I didn't even say, like,
wanna
oh,
do
what
it.
about your
You didn't
academic
give them.
advisor? Did you talk to your
Right.
academic advisor about this
Right.
before you dropped? Maybe they can suggest another class, or, okay, you're looking for a refund. There are options for you to get that money back, and let me walk you through those options.
Or take you to people who can.
Yes.
If you're not
Right.
really sure.
Right.
Call
Yeah.
Danielle.
Danielle.
Danielle will do it.
No, I was just gonna say,
Oh,
like,
Danielle
the,
had her hand up.
like, when you said you were gonna kill yourself and you said she was being dramatic. like,
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's not good. Obviously, it was not very empathetic with that part at all. And even though it might have been in jest or whatever, but we can never take those statements lightly, no matter what.
Oh, I was saying.
You're gonna say the same
Yeah.
thing.
That's my
yeah.
home.
Yeah, can never take that lightly, ever, just because it could be in frustration or whatever it may be. It's still a statement of, distress, for sure.
So what do you think was going on with my character?
It was sad.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
felt
Very
sad
sad
for
for
you.
I mean, what did you notice with the repetitiveness? Because she
Yeah.
kept on saying the same thing.
Right.
Right.
We touched on that a little bit
Well, she couldn't
before.
think clearly. She was just so like, this is happening, this is
Just
happening.
make
You're
it-
not-
make it happen.
You weren't helping, so she just kept cycling and cycling and cycling.
Bidding.
Right.
What else do you think was going on? Or what could possibly go on with the student?
I mean, they were obviously experiencing some sort of financial difficulty.
Sure,
So-
yeah, not being able to pay for the
Yeah.
class. So that got them kind of like in this loop of just not really kind of even listening. At some point I wasn't even really listening to you. I was just
right,
kind
we were
of
just going around in
focused on my
circles.
own thing.
Mhm.
Actually, in the scenario, the student was Asperger's, well, autism spectrum disorder, right? And wasn't able to kind of, like look beyond kind of what, and this did not happen in the bursar's office, this was another scenario, but was basically told by the person that they were talking with, just kind of like the procedures and the protocol, and not really addressing what the student was saying or what the student was their behavior was purveying to the person. So,
Yeah. So who wants to come up and try that role in a way that's actually would be helpful for Sheppy, poor Sheppy, right?
Who's gonna do it?
This is a hard one, yeah. Any brave volunteers?
I'll do it with someone else.
Okay. Sheila's up. How about Lisa, do you want to be the student? Or do you want to be the bursar?
hello.
Okay.
I think somebody else should be
Okay.
a student.
Sheila, you be the, and I'll be the student.
Okay.
There we go. Dream team, here we go.
Insanity. So you're the student, clinically speaking. Yes, I'll be the student. Okay, so I want my money back, right?
Yes.
You see my problem is for today.
Right.
Okay, okay. Don't recommend.
How can I help you?
I'm dropping out of class and I need my money back.
Well, the policy is that the classes.
Yeah, but I really need this money. I'm done with this class. I have to.
I
have my money back.
understand. I just have to explain to you that the policy of the school is that we can't give it to you right now.
Why? Sorry, Sheila. Why not? I paid for it. You told me the date it was due. I paid it. I'm not taking the class.
I
so-
understand, but the policy also is that there's a withdrawal on a
Yeah,
certain
but I
day,
need
and
my
you
money
didn't do
back
that.
because I
Right.
need to take another class, and there's a late start, so I can take it. But if you're taking 50% of my money, I can't take my class.
We know, why don't I do this? When I get my boss, and she can explain it to you a little bit better than.
That one over there?
She's not here.
And he's hiding under the desk.
Would that help you to understand a little bit better, you think? If we talk
I
to
don't
the
know, do you
director?
think she's gonna tell me that I could get my money back? There's a
I
chance,
can't-
maybe, or
I can't say that right
or
now,
take another
but,
class?
well,
maybe?
why don't we talk to her? If you give me 1 minute, I can get her for you.
Oh,
Would that
okay.
help
Is she
you?
gonna be able to help me today?
Well, why don't we do that? Can you give me a minute? Can you step to the side for 1 moment while I get her?
Or as long as she can help me today, because this is really stressful.
Okay.
I need to be able to
You
take
give me
another
1 minute,
class.
can you just give me 1 moment, step over to the side, and I'll be with you in a moment, okay?
We work together, so
Good job.
She didn't want to give up on that money, did she?
So I just wanted to say, so Sheila did a good job of like not getting frustrated, right, and trying to, slow down the process, hit the reset button. But this is the hard part of what we're asking you to do. And it's something that we had to go through years of school and experience and training for. Basically the whole point of what you're doing is trying to look beyond just the form of behavior and understand what the function of it is, right? So what's driving it? Even if he gets in that situation and you get to a point of clarity where he understands the policy, that's not really the problem, right? What was the actual problem in the situation?
Wanted the money back.
He wants to get another class, right?
Right,
That's why.
yes.
So it's not
That's
even about the
right.
money.
It's not about the
right?
money.
The money is a
Right.
secondary reinforcer to what he really cares about. So we still haven't helped him get the resolution to his problem. We've done a good job of not letting it escalate into a disaster, but and part of this is probably speaks to why we need to know how things work in different departments and stuff like that. But the second part of that is to try to understand, what does this student actually need? We don't even know still why he was withdrawing from the class. We assume that students make that decision in an informed way. I promise you, they don't. They make impulsive, poor decisions every day. So trying to make sure that what they're asking is actually what's going to be in their best interests is a good place to go as well. And then maybe it still is, and then presenting some other alternatives. So maybe why do you need to withdraw from this class? If he tells you that his mom died, then now we have another option for him. So but none of that happens unless you do first what you did, which is to not let it spin out of control. So that's always the prerequisite to any problem solving is to keep the cool and make sure that the student is still there and not kind of flipping out the way my example was with Ariella, or essentially leaving because they got frustrated the way Lisa did originally. So that was really good.
Yeah, so that sends the message, again, like what John was saying, was that really the bottom line is that we want to be empathetic. We want to show that we're listening to them. The simple question of tell me what's going on. What's going on today? How, not only what brings you here, how can I help you, but wow, okay, this sounds like you're upset, what's going on? Even just that simple question, what's going on, will allow the student to maybe explain themselves. And I think that's the problem, with our very busy division, and especially in a few weeks, we're going to be welcoming back hundreds of students back on campus, and everybody wants an answer yesterday. We're going to feel the pressure of moving them along the shuffle, but when students present in those ways, we need to slow down for them because they're in rush, but we need to understand the situation of why they're in such a panic to begin with, so that we can properly help them. And so the thing about, again, the message that we're sending home to you, that you don't have to be a counselor or a licensed psychologist or a clinician to do what we do downstairs. Everyone has the capacity to do it. So always actively listening. And listening to body language too. Lisa was even me, and I do this for a living, I was getting a little flustered, right? It's hard when students are so anxious and they're so flustered, it creates even you to be flustered. So just listening, look at their body language. Do they seem upset? Or do they look like they're coming back from something that made them angry? So not only hearing what they say, but looking at their body. being patient. Oh my God, this is going to be the hardest thing, again, especially in a few weeks when there's a line out the door of students waiting to see you. Again, working with the student. The student may not know the words that they're trying to say, so walking them through it slowly as possible. Like, okay, what exactly, like with Lisa, okay, what exactly are you looking to do? You're looking to drop, but why? What happened? What are you looking to do instead? And maybe I could have, triaged it a little bit better. Like, okay, you know what? Maybe your academic advisor can help you pick up a class, and Dr. Simmons, we can talk about writing a letter of appeal or whatever it may be. Do you want to finish it?
Right, empathize. So what is empathizing?
Putting yourself in their shoes.
Right, basically putting yourselves in those shoes. We don't know what happened right before they came to your office or before they came to speak to you, right? We don't know what's going on with them. We don't know what their history is. So try to kind of, instead of just jump to kind of like your reaction to, this scenario, think about, their perspective and what are the different things that, they are maybe going through or that can cause kind of this behavior. And it's important to be non-judgmental, right? So to not kind of, again, make those judgments, this person's crazy, they're just psychotic, they're nuts, or this, right? Like, try to kind of see things from their perspective and to not, if you get into that loop of just judging them or thinking, things about them that kind of come from your own perspective, try to kind of like catch that and be able to kind of really look at that person just as a student that needs your help and come at it with this curiosity. What can I do to help this person? I'm curious as to how this student got here, what's going on with them, right? So take more of like an objective curiosity standpoint than more of a subjective judgment against the student.
And this a statement that we always use all the time, even in our personal lives, is like, okay, just calm down. Like, that could be like a real trigger for these students that are already heightened. So try not to use those words, even though it might make sense in that moment. But it is actually imposing judgment on them because you're calling them out on their behavior. Like, you're kind of freaking out, and it's kind of weird. So, just calm down. Just try to avoid that altogether. And again, like, what's going on? Where is it that I can help you? I like to use that a lot with students. So I'm trying to understand like what they're asking. Like, what is it that I can do for you? Like, let's work backwards. Let's work forwards.
And of course, avoid overreacting. Like we saw, like John was saying, you're kind of, the more you kind of get to their level and it escalates things. So really try to keep a calm, not just voice, right, your body language, kind of really, try to locate that calmness and stillness within you because things can escalate really quick if you notice yourself matching their anxiety level. And be supportive, right? We kind of talked about that, just to be supportive rather than defensive, right? Instead of thinking, well, okay, feeling like you're being attacked. Again, that empathy, looking at what they're going through, how they must be feeling, how they must be kind of, what they're going through, instead of kind of taking it as a personal attack that you need to defend yourself with.
Any other ideas you guys have? Yeah.
I would just think it would be important, here it didn't matter as much, but to be on the same level, eye level. I mean, obviously, there was like this attack mode from the person towering over the person helping.
Like literally, physically?
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Physically,
Yeah.
yeah. It was just the way, like your first thing when you take somebody into your office, have a
You
seat.
sit down,
And
yeah.
right then, you're at least, I don't know.
Yeah, you're more
Same
peers now than you've already.
Yeah,
Right.
when they're maybe calmer, sitting, feeling like you're really giving them attention and not just, let's get through this conversation so you walk on out of here.
Right, so I can move on with my day, right? Any other ideas you guys have from your own experiences? Like, what have you seen, like, with troubling students or students that have?
I just feel like the most important part is like, I mean, all of this is challenging, and I pride myself on my ability to be patient and empathize with the students, but it's like, the resolution is what they want to hear. Like, they want an answer, and sometimes that answer is not what they want to hear.
Right.
A lot of the times,
Oh, totally.
and that's the hardest point is, how, essentially the only way to back it up is it's policy, but,
They
Yeah.
don't hear that, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, well, that's kind of where maybe that, again, that going up the line, like John was saying before, like, this is the best way I can explain it, but if, how about we, I can refer you to someone else if you want some other help with understanding this or something like that. I don't know if that would always help, but, you know, it's strength in numbers, right? So if you feel alone in that situation, like, you know, like have Dr. Simmons her first email, like you said, like have a coworker with you. And I think that's something that we do in our office whenever we hear conflict happening, which happens often. Like one of us, the counselors or someone, like will come out to the admin and sit, like what's going on, like stand beside them, how, you know, what's going on, how can I help you with this? You know, it sounds like there's something happening here that maybe I could help you with.
Or even, you can also try problem solving. I know that a lot of times there's lines behind you, but like what Lisa said before, asking, okay, what's going on, what happened, why do you want to withdraw, what's behind this, and coming up with other plans. Oh, maybe you could do it without this class, why don't you see your advisor, or maybe you can do some academic counseling with counseling and student success, and they can come up with an alternate route for you together, that type of thing. So problem solving, being invested with the student.
Because that's, again, like I said before, the student doesn't have the language to know what they even want, right? Or even though there's handbooks and there's policies, they don't read that stuff, right? They don't know what they're entitled to as students. So working with them to understand, like, hey, you have other options, and let me try to explain them to the best of my ability for you.
Well, what do you do if, like, I had a student that was clearly, he was losing it, for want of a better term. He came up despondent, he was withdrawn from a class, and then it just escalated. And I was like, oh, you seem upset. Do you want to speak to counseling? And he was like, absolutely not. I've talked to them already. Talking does no good. I'm not going down. I was like, well, you know, I can call somebody to come up, and he was not having it.
Yeah.
What do we do?
Yeah, I guess, like, you know, it's kind of like where John said before, I think you said it, like, we got to meet the student where they're at. Like, they're refusing to come to counseling. Like, we can't make them do what they don't want to do. So maybe that's a way to, like, you know what, like, if you ever need them, like, here's their brochure, here's their phone number, I can walk you down so you can see their office. But, you know, for you right now, if this isn't what you want to do, like, what else can I do to help you or something like that?
That's
Again, meeting them where they're at. Like, okay, you don't want to go to counseling, what can we do then?
Right.
I just want to, because this is to your point before as well, like sometimes there isn't the solution they want. Success is contextual. So in that situation, like the fact that if he leaves that situation knowing if he changes his mind he can go there, and he didn't like turn the table over on you, is a success. Like the fact that you can't give him the money he needs, but he didn't leave that situation saying everybody here is a jerk and nobody cares, that's a success. It's not the ideal success we were looking for, but the process should not change because of it. Whether or not something went exactly the way we wanted it to or not is neither here nor there. Sometimes there are practical problems, and sometimes you can't get the money you want or you can't get the class you want, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things we can do within that problem to still help them along. And maybe we don't see the results in that moment, but the next time there's some kind of catastrophe, they do take you up on that option, or they do know what the rule is and preemptively make a different decision.
Yeah, meeting them where they're at. Like, again, number one, actively listening, and number three, empathizing. Like, okay, it sounds like you're really frustrated, and I'm sorry that didn't work out for you before. So, you know, let me see what I can do for you today. And just so you know, they are a resource for you if you ever think that might be helpful for you. Here's our brochure.
Denise, you were going to say something. You sure? Okay.
So we just include some helpful resources for you guys too. There's a lot of information out there about mental health. So, I mean, I think we're going to maybe we'll send the slides if you want. You can let us know. Just to name a couple, you know, Active Minds, we do have a chapter on this campus. Is anyone familiar with Active Minds? For those of you who are not, it's a student-run organization, and they promote things like mental health awareness, and they do activities. They have events and brochures, right, and buttons, you know, that people can wear just to kind of promote the awareness of mental health on campus. That's just to name one of them, but you can look into the other ones on your own time. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns, ideas, et cetera, et cetera?
We threw a lot at you,
Yes,
so
we
this
did.
slide is kind of just like, take a deep breath, you got it through it, thanks for participating. Have any thoughts? Have any comments? No?
And we're open to comments, suggestions, ideas, thoughts after this too. Like, you might go home later and say to yourself, you know, I really want to know the answer to this, or what could I do for this situation? So we're always here for you to support you.
And we're available if your department wanted to come and just have us come in. We were talking about with financial aid and bursar, we're here to cater to topics that you need. The one with the parents, I really love that idea. We can definitely do something like that. So just let us know, and if you have any questions, we're always available for you guys. So thank you for coming, and before you leave, please fill out the evaluation that's on the table. We're gonna use it.
Thank you.